Thanks ever so much for clicking on here. I'm chatting with Paul Martin. He and I connected once the news had come out about Pilavachi. He started the church essentially in LA, the Soul Survivor Church. He's been a really supportive chap to me, and sort of when I was just asking him what's going on, he was an ear and really responsive. I then asked if I could help him with an organisation he set up, supporting victims and parents of victims of fentanyl. And we just really connected. So I've been asking if he could chat with me for ages, and he's just been rammed with this thing. I mean, it's been phenomenal, and he mentions that a bit later. In this conversation, we talk about Soul Survivor, we talk about Mike Pilavachi's and his kind of relationship with him. We talk about the people that have blown it and not carrying their weight, the people that don't speak out who should be. We speak about the systemic problems. We talk about the kind of carnal desires that we have, and the difference between that. We talk about what's excusable, perhaps excusable, and what isn't. And our conversation kind of ebbs and flows, and some of it's awkward, and some of it's tired, and some of it's angry, and some of it's upset. And for me, it's like a catch-up that we both required. I certainly required, perhaps more than he did, as well as a conversation that was worth filming. So this is a bit of a personal one, and it's a bit of an emotional one. And I wish we were in person as we filmed it, but he and I have chatted for hours in the past, not recently, but a while ago. And so we kind of know how one another works and the rhythm. So please do watch it and subscribe to this channel to be part of this. This isn't a channel all about Soul Survivor, and yet it's what encouraged me, perhaps. I mean, there are a few things in my past, but it was what encouraged me to turn the camera on myself rather than just be behind it. So please be part of it. Please put your questions into the comments. Please respond when you think we've been out of line or whether we've been on it. And me specifically. Don't have a go at Paul, because I think he's great. But yeah, thanks for being part of this. The light goes in and out because the sun's coming in and out. It's a horrible day, and then it's sunny. So apologies for the back and forth of the light. We have a few internet problems here and there, but it's just one of these things that hopefully you can have running while you're doing the washing up or another task. So yeah, thank you. Thanks again for watching all of this. It's really encouraging to me to know that it's useful to you. That's kind of the point of this. If it's not, I'll stop doing it. Thanks, everyone. The way that we connected, and I mean, you were among a handful of people who were instrumental in the growth of Soul Survivor that actually responded to me. The majority didn't even bother picking up or replying to my emails. And yet you were like, yeah, hey, let's just have a chat. And for me, that was incredibly just like supportive. I mean, I'd want to say encouraging. That, I mean, it was more simple than that. It was just supporting. And that's where we connected. It was around, stuff following the news that came out. And I think we could do with talking about that. The next stage of what I understand about what you've been involved in and fill in the gaps is, or more recently though at least, setting up like a children's charity or an organisation that supports children and young people that are going through those sort of stages of distress or harm or abuse. You're also involved in being a candidate within American politics as well, in California. You've been involved in consulting businesses and various other things, and then more recently setting up this huge endeavour of Walk for Life around the huge fentanyl problem within the US. And I've seen that firsthand, and I understand the absolute dehumanization of that drug. And the
It's a really good word. It's a really good word, Sam. True.
And so what I would love to talk about, I guess, as we spend a little while, I don't know how long you've got, maybe an hour, is that okay?
It's fine.
I would love to cover this sense of, there are those people with power who misuse it. There are those people with power who aren't aware of it. and part of the system. And that's certainly where my head goes with Soul Survivor. There are those people that are victims that have been hurt who remain silent and alone. And there are those of us who think, actually, a lot of that's wrong and we want to challenge it. And God's given me a gift, and Lord, I don't want to hide it under a bushel. How do you want me to use it? So I don't know how, I guess I suggested in that message to you, I don't know if you had opportunity to watch just the tail end of that video.
I did.
Jordan's such a lovely guy, so you probably didn't have time to watch it all. So he put it on TikTok after being encouraged. Hey, I'm the new vicar in charge in Romford. Romford's in East London. It's where I grew up. Essex as well, so it has a bit of a reputation for all sorts of things. But he put it on, and because of that reputation, because of who he is, because of his face, that's what the joke part. That thing went viral. He hit 2.5 million people.
Wow.
And the diocese didn't know what to do with it. They wanted to shut it down in some respects, as churches get worried about success, not knowing how to control it. He didn't say any of that. That's my view of it, and I can say that. And they told him he couldn't speak to all of the national newspapers and TV channels. Netflix got in touch, various others, and all of that was shut down. But he was happy to speak with me, which was very sweet of him. So I went back to Romford and had this chat, and he said, "Oh yeah, I've got a bit of an experience as well about Soul Survivor. So it's funny that you asked to talk about, just do this interview." And I thought lots of people have had, especially my age and under. So yeah, I didn't expect anything. And that last 4 minutes of that video, he just said, and I've since watched that interview you did with the Telegraph in Britain. And I was just like, oh my goodness. I watched it again. I didn't watch it since I uploaded it. I watched it again before sending to you. And I thought, here is an example of one of those people with power who's not necessarily even aware of it, but misusing it. So I think it would be good to talk about Soul Survivor first in our conversation. One of the things which I say to everyone I interview is, hey, I want your story, not your opinion. The interesting thing, though, I think with you is you're quite tooled up and vested and you have a vested interest enough to put your opinion in here too. So I don't really have a leading question other than, as you listen to Jordan tell his story, how did you respond to it? What were your thoughts? And I'll stick a link to it, for anyone watching here.
I mean, what jumped out was something I had seen with my own eyes, I don't know, dozens of times. Mike having this proclivity toward finding people, speaking into their lives in the way that he spoke into Jordan's life. And always with the goal of a bright future. I don't know if bright is the right word, but a kind of future that would involve leadership.
Yeah.
Would involve, in many cases, international travel, a certain degree of, these aren't the right words, but fame, celebrity, being on a stage, which is interesting. And I wasn't surprised to hear what he said. Also that this is being wrapped around hearing from God. So, one scenario would be, hey, you seem like a really bright guy. I lead this organization, as you know, called Soul Survivor, and we have a program called ABC. I forgot the name of it.
Yeah.
Would you be interested in maybe learning more? Because what we like to do is find, identify, and recruit and onboard people that really have a heart to care for others in Jesus' name.
Yeah.
Let's set up a meeting. That would be one scenario, but of course that's not the scenario. That it's not the tool that Mike used. I don't even want to say tool. That seems loaded. That's not what he did.
Oh, the approach,
it was
yeah.
oftentimes wrapped in, I have this direct access to the same guy that parted the Red Sea and turned water into wine, and now he's speaking to you through me. And that's a very, well, we know it history. We know the scars of that ideology. I'm not saying I don't agree with that there's prophetic
Yeah.
gifting, but with Mike, it was, it was very vulnerable people because of the power dynamic.
Yeah, and we were desperate to hear at that age. We for anything that was exciting. That, yeah, quite right. We'd read Genesis, and then we were seeing the same thing happen in this celebration or meeting that we were invited to. I often wonder. You were leading the Soul Survivor Church in and around LA, right?
Yes.
So you must have done the same. You must have stood at the front and picked out the odd person, thinking that suggesting they were anointed or that they had their
Never.
future. You
Not
never
one
did
time.
it. Really?
Never.
But it was.
It wasn't.
It was really common though, and it still is.
It was, and I worked for John Wimber, and I was there for decades. No, not quite decades when I met Mike, but I wasn't one that was inclined toward, God spoke to me about you. I'm trying to think. I want to make sure that's accurate.
But John Wimber would, right? He.
Oh gosh, yes.
That was his stick.
Yeah, right. And many Vineyard pastors did as well. And I'm not criticizing them. It just wasn't really the way that I worked. And to be clear, with Soul Survivor, I was living in the UK. I was in the midst of a transition. I went to the festival, had never been to it before, and I was astounded with what I saw. I can't describe how impressed, moved. I was a guy in the worship music business and conferences for many years.
Yeah.
In the Vineyard, and had thought I had seen it all, but I had never seen anything like this. The closest thing this was the early 1980s at Kenyon High School, where the very famous Lonnie Frisbee, and there was this move of God, and I was in high school. I was 15 years old when I first walked in to that church. And it was definitely something that seemed supernatural. I have some doubts about that as I get older, but I'm not saying it wasn't supernatural, but it definitely was something that defied. And I saw that in Somerset, and I was the one to seek Mike out. Mike didn't come to me and say, I sought him out.
Right.
And I said, this is who I am. And he knew me through a lot of mutual friends, and it was amazing. He's a guy that, he's a risk taker and a dreamer. And he was thrilled that I had this vision to bring this to the States. It was, good for the movement. It was good for a guy that loves nice food and nice beaches and different countries. And I lived at the beach in LA area. But Mike didn't come to me and say he had a word for me, just to be clear.
So I didn't realize that you kind of, the very thing that Soul Survivor kind of did, you'd been in the influential LA, California scene as a teenager yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And that's.
I used to go to Calvary Chapel when I first walked foot into the Vineyard. The first Protestant church service I had ever been to in my life. I was a Catholic, Roman Catholic. I had never seen anything like that. And then at the time, this church was called Calvary Chapel, Yorba Linda. And we would go down to the big Calvary Chapel, which was about a 20-minute drive from my house, on Monday nights. They'd have different events. And that wasn't like the Jesus movement, but it was definitely the end of it. And, there was a movement. This was a movement, I guess there have been others since. But Soul Survivor had that same feel. What I liked most about it, perhaps, was the emphasis on issues of justice, even though that's now become in the U.S. a bad word, that phrase, which is bizarre. But I really resonated with Mike and really understand. I really believe Mike did understand theologically what I talked about, caring for the poor, and I believe that he believed it, and he probably still does. But when I saw that mixed in, and his famous teaching about worship and justice belonging together in Amos 5, I just was like, how do I sign me up? I'm all in on this. Because in the Vineyard, that wasn't the message as much. It was locally at the Anaheim Vineyard, and there was a profoundly influential ministry that John Wimber never really talked about to the poor and the homeless. But in John's conferences, there were smatterings of that message. But with Mike, that was it. It was mostly...
I remember similar things. I remember you reminded me, I mean, it would have been like 95, 96, and the call to the front would have essentially have been, God, would you break my heart for the things, something like break my heart in the same way that the broken, or something along those kind of lines. It was obviously very tidy in the way that it was said, more so than that. But there was this, almost the deal was, you have this transcendent experience and it's not just for you. And so the promise of mission, the promise that, Jordan experienced of going abroad, of going all these things, the deal was you have this experience to share it. And so that was another reason that for me it seemed like, it didn't lead to the prosperity gospel. It didn't lead to this kind of overinflated experience that only I benefit from. There was this eyes up aspect. Well, just very quickly, I'm interested in why is justice seen negatively in the US now?
Well, with the Trump influence, wokeism. Is thought of as progressive, liberal. I mean, it's the classic argument between the left and the right.
Sure.
And unfortunately, and so they've done a really masterful job at, these people are, and I'm not weighing in on whether I support them or not. This isn't a political statement. They're very good at messaging. And they're very good at using words and finding a way to demonize things. Really, at the end of the day. And so I consider myself woke. I want to be awake. I think Jesus was awake to the issues.
Oh, sleep, arise from the dead, and Christ will shine upon you.
Right, I mean, I like the idea of having my eyes open. I like the idea of not being, Jesus actually talked about darkness and light quite a bit. So I prefer the light, having my eyes open, and being awake to crushing issues that destroy body, mind, and spirit. But in the U.S., social justice, and this has been happening really for decades, but many would say, many believers, because the church in the U.S. now is largely bought into this, I see social justice from a very kind of medieval philosophical standpoint, where this idea of rectitude, like the righting of wrongs, that's kind of what rectitude was written about quite a bit by some of the early church fathers during that time. And there's a very natural sense, I was going to look back and see if there was a picture behind me, but, if you walk into a room and there's a big painting and it's crooked, there's just a natural sense of, oh my gosh, your picture's crooked, right? Or honeyed, and you straighten it. And the reality is you're doing justice to that painting, or a young child drowning in a pool. There's a sense of righting that wrong. And so social justice just means fixing things on a social level, on a human level. Like at its core, that's what it means. But anyway, that's a whole...
Well, it kind of is, it kind of isn't, right? So if you... I mean, the incongruity of what you're suggesting about Mike having a really close awareness of justice at a global or a societal level, but not understanding that manipulating young men is not unjust. There isn't injustice within that. It's just so skew-if.
It is. I mean, and again, we'll talk more about that. I remember C.S. Lewis once, I'm going to botch this, but he was making a comparison between something like primitive sins or animal sins.
Yeah.
And then the ones that frankly Jesus seemed to care more about, which were pride, gluttony,
Yeah.
mostly pride and hypocrisy. Those are
And
sins
jealousy.
of the heart, right? Those
Yeah.
jealousy,
Yeah.
envy,
Yeah.
strife.
Uh-huh.
What he seemed to spend most of his time when he was angry, he was referring to those things.
Yeah.
And I'm not permitting sins of the flesh, but anybody listening to this will probably perhaps understand how we have certain animal, if you will, temptations.
Yeah.
That could have to do with food, drink, and sex mostly. And Mike wasn't able to curb it, and I'm not permitting it, of course. I went out and advocated for a stronger response from the Church of England. I want to go back just a little bit if I could. I went to New Mexico 2.5 years ago, to write this book on what I consider to be 5 different kinds of Christians. And I categorically reject the totally mistaken view regarding the Great Commission. And I've preached that message. I've sat in hundreds of services where one way or another, the man on stage is talking about our need to go to the nations and go to the world. And, you know, one of the things I learned, I got my master's degree in philosophical theology, but there were some kind of core classes at the university I studied at that were required, and it was kind of hermeneutics and kind of best practices for biblical interpretation and exegesis. And one of the things that they teach you very early on is understanding the difference between descriptive and prescriptive passages. And so a good example would be when Jesus spits in the mud and rubs it onto someone's eye.
Yeah.
That's a descriptive passage.
Sure.
It's not meant to be a universal law for all people for all time,
Yeah.
as we know. And one of the mistakes that are made in heretical teaching is someone will take something that's meant to be descriptive
Great.
and turn it into a universal.
Yeah.
The story of the sermon, not the Sermon on the Mount, but the Great Commission, in my view, and I know many people will argue, was a specific event with a specific group of people, Jesus and 11 people. Judas was out. And Jesus said to those 11 people, the Great Commission.
Yeah.
That, in my view, is a very unique.
Yeah.
And from a theological point, I don't think that is meant for every. I'm sorry, you froze.
No, it's okay. You're still there. You've gone a bit pixelated, but yeah, we're here.
From a theological point of view, I think it's horrible exegesis to say, since Jesus said this to 11 people, that all Christians. But the bigger proof is that if you go back to the New Testament until today, it has not been the case at all that everybody is supposed to go out into the nations and make disciples. It's just not the case.
Right.
It's not been the case historically. It hasn't been the case in the Bible. It's not true today. Some people have those callings.
Yeah.
And really, my heroes of the faith were very humble about their personal callings. Like Mother Teresa, she wouldn't say everybody's supposed to do what she's doing. But these preachers love to plaster that message on everyone and anyone they can.
Yeah.
And oftentimes producing shame, guilt, a sense of you're not doing God's will, you're not good enough.
Yeah.
How did Mike know that this guy, I mean, he ends up being right about this guy, but he was wrong about a lot of people.
Yeah.
That he had these words about these people needing to be the next John the Baptist.
Yeah.
And I don't think putting that around, that's probably why I never did it. I think it's just manipulative and wrong to say to somebody, you know, God has this calling for your life. You better be damn sure.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, you're putting this weight on them. And Jesus had a thing or two to say about strapping people with, with burdens.
Someone trying to get into your room.
Hold on 1 second. I think that people are working next door.
No, don't worry. So there's some banging going on next door to Paul. We'll see what happens.
Hey guys, I can't have that noise. I'm on a recorded, very important call. Or any way they can stop for like. Thank you so much.
Are we okay?
Yeah, I'm in a hotel, and they're like deciding to knock their walls down.
Thanks for arranging it. Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, challenging the Great Commission. Yeah, that's pretty punchy.
You could leave that out.
No, I'm not. So I won't edit this. The only way I'm going to edit this is if you say, "Hey, don't mention that name." I wonder how, forensic you want to be about this as well. I wonder how useful that would be. The reason I say some of that is the individuals that Pilavachi. That's their version of quiet. Maybe they were just finishing, just knocking that one nail in.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Okay.
Yeah, don't sweat it. But so the two people that I spoke with that were hurt most were those that were physically pushed around and subject to Pilavachi, and those who hung their future onto his words, and hung their future onto being within the clique. What motivates me to do this is to say, hey, we're all together in this. And I think what you said there, I mean, it's the same as King David, right? David from what we know, he got it wrong a heck of a lot personally in those kind of base, as you said, sex. Maybe he was a drinker as well. We don't know. But he spoke about the systemic issues. He spoke about the big things. Jesus, we know the same. Paul, we have an understanding in the same way, although he was a lot more prescriptive with the specific churches he was writing to. Pilavachi now is kind of scapegoat. He's gone, he's blown it, he's upset a bunch of people. But the problem wasn't that. So when I've spoken to friends, I've got a friend who's quite a senior rabbi, and we've just connected over some work things. And I told him this story. What he couldn't believe was that it was hidden for 20 years, that people knew about it, and they sat on it because of the success. The issue, we need to find some sort of justice in this. And I think Pilavachi, it'd be great if he could just say, I've blown it. I'm 45. If someone says that to me, I'm going to go, yeah, there are times I've been really close, or I've messed up and I've blown it. But isn't it? Anyway, that I would love to hear that. But it's the system that I'm most frustrated and angry by. Why? Because it will happen over and over again. We've got like 3 or 4 big court cases in going on relating to similar aspects within the Church of England at the moment in Britain. It's just ridiculous, and it's the system that allows it to happen. So I think as you're sort of theologically talking about it, challenging the Great Commission, I think we're also at a stage where it's like, well, what role? And I haven't sorted this as a question. What fascinates me and interests me, and I want to hang out with you, is what's the system behind fentanyl use that needs to be challenged? The poor guy. I can actually think of the woman that I spoke to, that you introduced me to on one of these calls, and she'd lost her, I think it was son, wasn't? And you probably don't. You've spoken to so many people, but she just told us this story so pragmatically, and it was deeply sore for me, because she was able just to talk about it so matter of fact. And of course she weeps regularly about it, and she said she did, but on the call she just had it together. But she's representative of an entire system that enables fentanyl to get into the US, distributed so readily, used on social media to spread it, to buy it, and then there's zero accountability once that's happened. In the church, in a much lesser way, people are dying in the same way, but their faith, their aspiration for the future, their way that they view other people, the way they see themselves within community or not part of community, all those things have been influenced potentially for the rest of their lives. And it's a system that enables that. There's a similarity. So when I was sort of suggesting it's almost like you're a priest without the collar outside the church doing these different things. There seems to be a priestly calling to what you do, the children's charity, the involvement in politics. What is it? And we can talk about sort of Walk for Life maybe a bit later again. But what's the system that needs challenging within our church tradition? And I don't want to just talk about the Church of England because it's so boring. But this is a bigger thing. This is something that we relate to one another, because I didn't go to the Frisbee church, but the churches I went to were massively influenced by it. I didn't go to Wimber's church, but I was offered an internship at Anaheim. I've been very close to it. I get it. I know it, and so many of us do. What needs? I've got to a stage now where I'm like, does traditional church even work anymore? That's the level I've got to. But what's the system that you've observed that just needs to? How can we get?
I would say first, I'm a believer, a firm, ardent, staunch believer in the power of Christ and his church to provide hope and healing, and especially community to people who are lonely and lost. It did that for me. The history books have been written for hundreds of years by people who found a community of faith and were heard, and there were venues provided for people to share about the reality of life, which is the crisis of pain and loneliness and disappointment. And I believe in this. I believe in the redemptive power of Jesus Christ, and how, whether that happens in some supernatural way or just in aligning with his teaching in the community of people, which is more of an empirical kind of thing, it has had undeniable power going back to the very beginning of this thing, 2,000 years ago. And so I'm a believer. I'm a defender of the faith. A lot of my friends don't think that I am anymore because I'm not doing it in the conformist kind of way, but I live my life. I wake up every day trying to, in my case, I do feel like one of those people who's supposed to spend his or her life working to promote this ethos of Jesus and caring for others. So I have to preface this with that, because a lot of people watching or listening are going to think that I'm one of these church bashers, or I've backslidden, or
Sure.
I'm too liberal, or whatever they're going to throw on me. And it's nonsense. I think a couple of things. I've started looking at church much more from a purely sociological, and this is not a theological commitment. This is not anything about any book I've read or a position would be theological in nature. It's just I've stepped back a bit in a lot of these things, like with Mike Pilavachi and others. If we cannot see church apart from God or the Bible, but just that's a sociological reality. So is going to a football game, right? Or joining a tennis league, or going to university. These are all groups of people, right? And they all could be studied and are studied by sociologists. Max Weber was the father of sociology, and he at some point thought, why aren't we studying this thing called group dynamics, or whatever you want to call it? And I think when you look at what we call the church from a sociological point of view, there's nothing really unique going on. What happens in churches happens in synagogues and mosques and high schools and places of employment. No different. And as Christians, we tend to, and again, and I say as Christians, there I go again.
Yeah.
This is sociological reality. In these groups, there are always power structures because these groups came together because of power. Somebody organized, and again, it could be the school, it could be the parliament, it doesn't pick it, doesn't matter. Your daughter's ballet studio, doesn't matter. And so each of these sociological groups have certain power structures. That's how they were formed.
Yeah.
So United Against Fentanyl, the organization I lead, I have power within that structure. And then in the larger fentanyl awareness community in the US, I have a place in that as well, right? So I say that to say what we see in the churches isn't any different than what we see in the school with the principal that kind of had sexting with the 16-year-old. Power, animal instinct, insecurity, desire to be number one, all those types of things are happening, and they're happening in the church. And I think what baffles me, Sam, and it goes back to what I said about, did I have prophetic words? Would I go up to people out of the blue that are 15 years old and say, God has a call in your life? I just think it's inordinately irresponsible. Do I think it happened in the scripture? It did. Do I think there are moments where men or women could have a very sacred, divine word for somebody in that way? Yes, I do think that happens. But in the case of Pilavachi, he was going around the world doing that. It was almost like as simple as, can I pray for you? It was always dependent in many ways on how handsome that man was. I'm sorry, but one of the first things I noticed about Mike was he would travel and these boys were all beautiful. I'm not gay, but they just were very good looking guys. And this is not an indictment on, it was just something I observed, and I wasn't the only one to observe that. And so I guess the first part is I believe in the church. The second part is, okay, can we look at this purely in terms of sociology?
Yeah.
And when we do that, the sad, gut-wrenching part is that you would think, and this is what I said in, I think, the Telegraph interview, but in the case of Christianity, kind of the one thing, forget everything else, the one thing, Hippocratic oath, don't hurt people.
Yeah.
I have a podcast that I started about a year ago called The Wolves, and it's about spiritual abuse in the church. And I haven't done an episode in a while, but episode 1 is about, I lay a very firm framework for Jesus himself saying, beware, be aware.
Yeah.
This is an imperative tense sentence. Beware. He's saying to his people, like, there are going to be these people out there.
Yeah.
Be aware of them because they're deceivers. They're charading themselves in sheep's clothing. And that's the part that baffles me. How could somebody, and in this case, Graham Cray just as much as Mike Pilavachi.
Yeah.
Every bit as much.
Yeah.
The guy, he knew it. He knew the stuff. I knew him. He was there. He got a lot of glam out of being on the stage and being the sophisticated, thoughtful, sociological vicar. He's full of shit. The guy should burn in hell. I'm sorry. No, he shouldn't burn in hell, but he should be sanctioned. He enabled this.
Yeah.
People are scarred and devastated, not just because of Mike Pilavachi, but like you said, the system, Liz Biddle, these people knew it was going on, and I think their desire to be part of something exciting, they swept it aside. And that's the part that I want to say a word too strong for this podcast, I can't get. These people must be charlatans. They must be the wolves in sheep's clothing that Jesus talked about. Because who would permit some child drowning in a pool to drown? And that's what they were doing.
A friend of mine's making a documentary around mental health and suicide within the music industry. And the thing which is absolutely gut-wrenching is a band or an artist always outsells themselves if they kill themselves. The management always rub their hands together, thinking, wow. If this happens, how much money are we going to make? That's the darkest side of the music industry, right? In some respects, Pilavachi then was the rock star, and the management were like, wow, he's doing a fairly good job. Let's just see if we can keep this going. Was it that? So why I like what you're talking about, treating the church as a sociological entity in its own right, is we can talk about it. And we don't get wrapped up in spirituality, nostalgia. We don't get wrapped up in the family nature of it. We don't get muddied with the personalization and the dependence that we had on it or have in it.
And the dialectic is exactly the same as the gynecologist that ends up, it's all the same.
Yeah.
They use the exact same tools, and more, they use the tools of manipulation. We used to train people to mentor neglect, abuse, and abandoned children, and our training was the best. And what we would train these people on is, imagine the person you would least expect when you're interviewing people after they've passed their background check.
Yeah.
The person you least expect to be a child abuser.
Yeah.
That's the person you have to worry about, because they're experts, no different than animals in the animal kingdom that camouflage themselves. No different than the tiger that's quietly walking. This is what they do.
Yeah.
And that's true sociologically across it could be religion, it could be politics, it could be schools, it could be sports teams, right? These and then what's sick, and it's textbook stuff, right? Is after they get caught, their response is always 100% the same. First, silence. They will be silent. Of course, they're not going to blow the whistle on themselves. Once things start to rise, there will be denial. And eventually, and you saw this classic with Mike, is they'll start to attack their abusers in almost every case. Now, Mike didn't aggressively attack his abusers, but his apology was, gaslighting.
Yeah.
In the case of someone that I'm interested in, this guy, Alan Scott in California, him and his rock star worship leader wife go around calling people that are calling out the dozens who have accused him of abuse, haters, protesters. So they're actively attacking those who are attacking them. But when it happens, within a system, we'll call it a system, I guess, where the leader of that system exemplified almost nothing but caring for people who had been victims of that in one way or another. But then to go and abuse people within there is nothing more disgusting.
No.
In my view.
No.
At least I don't want to say this the wrong way, but there have been other leaders who have led genocides that weren't, when this is happening in the name of Christ in his church, that's where I just kind of say, wait. And I have to say one more thing about the system. The Church of England. I'm not as close to it, but I was an ordinate once.
Oh, were you?
Aspirant, I guess. An aspirant. Yeah, I was going to become an Anglican priest. But, and I know some of these players, and if they only knew what a tiny world they live in. I'm going to use Tim Hughes, for example. In Tim Hughes' world, he's a rock star.
Yeah.
He is a rock star too. But you go randomly pick 1,000 people.
Worship stuff. Let's not say rock. I'll challenge you on that. But yeah.
Okay, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
One of the things I saw after decades of, a lot of time working in the churches, these people end up becoming so self-absorbed, really thinking, go ask 10,000 people in a random city who Mike Pilavachi is. Maybe 1 out of 10,000 will know. Ask them who Nicky Gumbel is.
Yeah.
Go ask if that. In England, it would be different.
Well, I'm not sure. No, seriously, I'm not sure. So they become self-absorbed, and is that the system? So there's a universal trait among this sort of. It's so sad. It just makes me so it makes me angry and sad.
I guess my point is I'm speaking to a Brit, and The Magician's Nephew, Lewis's book, if you remember.
Yeah.
You put on the ring and you end up in the wood between the worlds.
Right.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And these guys, Polly and what was his name? Anyway, they look out and they realize, they go into this one world, and then they come out into Charn, and they come out, and they were in Earth, and they come out, and they look out, there are millions of pools, and they realize, oh my God. And in the one world, Charn, there was this queen, but that was just one world.
Yeah.
And so what I'm trying to articulate is, let's say the Church of England, that's one world. And within that world, you have these people who are really important in that world.
Yeah.
Nicky Gumbel said, he's retired, but really, that's just one pool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody knows who the hell these people are
No.
out of their pool, but they don't understand that. So within their pool,
Yeah.
you have the Archbishop. So there was some recent news about that. Maybe that's more of a figure who will have more. No one will know who this person's name is outside of England, and maybe even outside of the people who go to church in England.
No.
But I see such self-importance and infatuation that these people have with themselves.
And with
when
each
at the end of the day, no one knows who the hell they are outside of their little tiny pool.
So is this why no one's spoken up? So, I mean, the Redmans made their video they kind of waited to the 11th hour and they made something that was, hey, still buy our CDs. I mean, they might as well have that as a call to action. Hey, we're writing a book that will be coming out soon. Do buy it. I mean, it just, for me, I was just like, this is bizarre. Those guys, I tried to get in touch with them just because I wanted to have a chat. Matt Redman taught me how to do his worship style when I was on the gap year. I used to wrestle with Beth on the floor in the Watford thing, and we'd all do all of that, and it was a lot more exciting to wrestle with her than Pilavachi. But they didn't respond to me.
What's that?
They didn't respond to me, when I got in touch. The Hughes brothers, they have replied to me. Is it because and this is my thought based on what you're saying, it's because I don't fit their level of importance.
100%. Neither do I.
But what on earth is that about?
Matt's a friend. Matt happens to live very close to me, and we've seen each other a few times. And I think these are two very different things. I think in the case of Tim and Pete, I was there, like in that little swimming pool. Their dads were this and that and blah, blah, blah.
Always,
Who the F cares?
No.
It's not that big of a deal.
No, it's not.
But in that system, you benefit from keeping your mouth shut. If Tim has his eyes on becoming the archbishop or a bishop, he best keep his mouth shut, keep his head down, not be a rabble-rouser. It's very British, right?
Yeah.
You score points by not being controversial. And, and these guys get on stage and actually try to get people to believe that they actually follow the teachings of Jesus, and they don't. Because what did Jesus do? When he saw injustice, he spoke out.
Yeah, he did.
He lost his reputation.
Yeah.
Because he had the balls to speak out.
Yeah.
That's like the Jesus.
Yeah, it is.
And these guys will have no part of that because they are in this cocoon called, in the case of Tim, I'm not talking about Matt. With Matt, I think it's very different. But within the case of someone like Tim or Pete, it does not benefit them. It doesn't benefit their children. It doesn't benefit their legacy to speak out. And I know, maybe he wrote a letter or made some statement, very crafted, but it's self-protection. That's what's happening. And that's the problem. And that's been the case in the Catholic Church for many decades. A lot of good has been done, especially with Pope Benedict, who was very, very heads rolled with him. But and with Matt, I love Matt and Beth. I think that the world of them, and Matt was a victim, not just of Mike, but I think of someone like Matt with, my goodness, what he endured. I'm don't want to say an expert on developmental trauma, but it doesn't get much higher in terms of what they call adverse childhood experiences. And what Matt has been able to do, it chokes me up, and be such a stellar man of, did he get that exactly right? Maybe not, probably not. But I give him a lot more grace than I do someone like Tim Hughes, who was coddled, who has such an infrastructure around him. And, if he's listening to this, I could just see him shaking his head, because to confront the reality that you could have used your voice and influence on behalf of those abused by Mike, and you didn't.
No, they didn't. The next stage, though, is the story, not opinion aspect to me. I was encouraged into that, to want to be part of that. That's what Soul Survivor did. So really,
that world,
the Soul Survivor whole process and the evangelical charismatic thing that's here, and I've been, I worked in the US for like a year. I know it in Charleston. It encourages you into that sect. So I mean, I've had experience, very high level political, without being told it was political. And everything you described there, keep your head down, get the work done. I mean, it's how you achieve, it's how you do well, it's how you're trusted. Which is a complete reverse of my understanding of what a church family is. The sense that I was talking to some, when as you get older, your friends lessen, right? You have a few close people. You have lots of associates, lots of people you could have a beer with or a coffee with, but your friends get less. And a way that I sort of mark the level of my friendship is, have they seen me lose my temper or cry? And then how have they responded to me in either of those situations? In some respects, I went into just understanding this scenario in that same way. There were a bunch of people who would understand if I was upset. There would be a bunch of people who would understand and deal with me if I got angry. But I was just on my own.
Yeah. My first point remains, I believe in the power of the church, and good is done despite, right? So even while Mike was doing these things, people were finding community, people were finding hope, people were finding heard, they were being heard, they were being encouraged, they were feeling part of something, they were not lonely anymore, maybe they were getting off of drugs. So, it's one of those both and things, right?
Yeah.
There's a mystery to it, but I still ultimately believe, and we can't estimate the power of the evolution of the digital media in exposing these things. Just 30 years ago, it wasn't going to be possible for there to be this kind of immediate exposure.
No.
So I think it seems like there's more of it. And in the US, there's a lady, Julie Roys, and she has the Roys Report. And she really feels called, ex-Vineyard, from what I understand, to, be one that, like Jesus said, to expose these charlatans, and many of them are outright charlatans. Alan Scott, a good case of full-blown outright charlatan. I mean, he's got religion so that he could amass wealth and power, and to the devastation of thousands and thousands and thousands of people. There's nuance here, though, because Mike's wasn't like that. Mike's was more of a very base animal. I have that too. You have that too.
Yeah.
Most human beings have this, whatever you want to call it, but
appetite,
this, proclivity, toward intimacy, sex, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And that was Mike's vice. And, we should celebrate that somebody didn't come forth and say, there was penetration. I'm sorry, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not holding him up. I would guess if Mike is listening to this, he would, or during that whole time, he's probably saying to himself, look, it's not like I pinned someone down and raped them.
No.
But the devastation from power differential, whether it be a pastor, whether it be a school principal, whether it be a doctor, is still devastating, crushing.
And he's a bright enough person to know, what becomes criminal and what doesn't, and still get a kick out of it enough for it to be worth doing. So when we look at it in that kind of, because time heals, sure, we understand that, but this isn't done. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk with you about Soul Survivor, and we can start moving into fentanyl, because that's the kind of like, holy moly, what are you up to with that? But what's the next stage for this? Do people just need to publicly apologise? With that, do some of the names that, I mean, Graham Cray, I went to Ridley Hall a lot on the reason because he was the principal there, and I valued seeing him on the stage. His personal brand and the importance of brand and Soul Survivor brand and everything else you mentioned right at the beginning. Those things were really important to me as a teenager, and I bought into it. So
I was older, but so did I.
So what?
In the case of Mike.
Yeah, for sure, and they did it incredibly well. But what? And he put people around himself like Matt Redman who gave him credibility. I bought into Soul Survivor really because of the gifting and the authenticity that I understood in Matt Redman, not because of Mike Pilavachi. I think a lot of people have misunderstood that. He set the tone. He created the culture. He created the environment for Pilavachi pretty much to say anything. And a bunch of teenagers were very receptive as a result. And then the guys copied that same model, and he looked for people to continue that model. It fell apart when maybe the most recent guy couldn't keep up, but that's me being quite damning, I suppose. In terms of what should people be expecting to do, I was invited to a installation of a vicar who was kind of going back to, and I'd been talking with him, and his experience of Soul Survivor was quite significant. He took time off work as a result because it really damaged him, and now he was getting installed again. I spoke to him on and off on WhatsApp and said, "How are you doing?" And when I said to him, the last message I said, I'm kind of struggling with this at the moment, and I just left it like that. He left me hanging for like 3 months. And then sent me an invitation after 3 months to his installation. I was like, "Have you sent this? Did you mean to send this to me?" I was like, and I was thinking, there's so much like just pretending, if we don't talk about it, it will go away. And yet, I mean, we're doing this in our conversation now, and I don't feel like we necessarily resolve it, but it doesn't stop with Soul Survivor. It doesn't stop with Holy Trinity Brompton. It doesn't stop with all the various plants that are out of it. The culture is still the same. They still do it's you. They still have the creator transcendent experience through the worship curve. They still get you to go to the front to be prayed for, as if that's going to sort everything out and everyone has to go to the front. There's still a culture that you need to learn in order to fit, and a way to behave in order to get along and get on in the career of religiousness. I don't know whether I'm just asking a rhetoric, whether I'm looking for an answer or not. But the problem isn't just the Church of England. The problem, I think, is the model and the approach.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I can't really play in that world anymore.
Okay.
It just seems silly to me.
Yeah.
Even though I see people who are finding life and finding hope. Maybe it's just because I've gotten older, but I have to occasionally go to a service, and just even a lot of the phrasing and the language that they use, which is very, very. We visited. My wife and I visited a local church recently, and she said, "Sam, I feel like I've grown up and the church hasn't." Yeah. So I don't know. There's a real puzzle, but good happens there, and many of these leaders, I would say that the sin of pride and kind of self-importance it's in the interest of these people to turn a blind eye, not be controversial, the total misguided view that we need to be loving. There's this guy, Pete Greig, who I'm sure you know about. And it's just unbelievable to me, the packaging around this guy, right?
I don't understand.
And I've never met him.
No.
All I know is he was there. He was on Alan Scott's board. Alan Scott said, God spoke to me and took a $100 million building, a $2 million house, and $7 million of cash. And Pete resigned, but wrote this milquetoast bullshit letter about how he just wants to be kind and loving, and he loves the Vineyard, but it's just bullshit.
Yeah.
And then he goes around with his smiley face and his beard and talking about prayer and how nice he is. The guy's full of shit. He saw firsthand the insidious heist and hijack and fraud, and he could have used his voice to help do what Jesus did when he was turning tables and taking out whips and calling people broods of vipers. He could have leveraged that. He didn't want to because his career and his persona wouldn't let him.
No.
And the same with Nicky Gumbel. I don't care how anointed or how big their whatever is, but if they think they're following Jesus Christ, they're completely mistaken. Because you don't get to just pick the Jesus that said, blessed are the peacemakers.
No.
And Paul in 1 Corinthians 1. You don't just get to pick that.
No.
And then leave out what some of the most central aspect of Jesus' teaching was, calling out people in the house of God that were using that platform to abuse others. Pete Greig was right there. And Nicky Gumbel was right there. They didn't say a damn thing.
No. People are waiting for them to speak. That's what's troubling. People are putting on hold so much of their lives, waiting for them to speak. And they're choosing not to. And they have power still, in spite of not speaking. It's flipping aggravating.
Yeah.
Yeah, who's going to turn some tables? Turn over some tables. So fentanyl. Let's take. We take Soul Survivor, and I raise you the national fentanyl problem of the USA and the Americas,
and soon and already coming to Europe very fast.
Yeah,
blinding speed.
So you,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd love you just to tell me your story of how you got into this, and so you were teaching, right? Then you went. No, go on. Yeah. Go ahead. No. So I remember you were teaching, and then you went to take a sabbatical in New Mexico.
Yeah, I actually was leading a predominantly national, but even international organization that provided trauma-informed mentoring to children who had been abandoned, neglected, and abused. In the U.S., we call it children in the foster care system. You have your equivalent in the U.K., I forgot what it's called. And I was traveling a lot. It's very grueling work. We had 200 chapters around the U.S. and a few overseas as well. And it was time for me to hang up my hat. I was just getting too burned out on this very difficult work. And I took, if you will, a sabbatical. I drove my 2001, you'll be happy to know, Land Rover.
Hey.
Go Britannia to New Mexico.
And it got you there.
It got me there. It still does. It's a great car. And it was meant to be a real retreat. I was way up in the mountains. The closest place you could buy a bottle of milk was 30 minutes away, and that was a gas station but to really go grocery shopping at a place, it took an hour and a half. And so every week or 10 days, I would drive down to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I would drive through this random town that we all drive through sometimes. And I'm making a very long story short, but I just saw almost, Somalia-like rubble and boarded up buildings and people wandering the streets like it was, I don't know what TV show that was, but when people like wander the streets like they're, and I got out of my car eventually and asked what was going on. It's a town of 3,000, I later learned. And what they said was fentanyl hit the town. This area had a long history with opioid addiction, and fentanyl is an opioid, and it's basically, put heroin out of business to a large extent. And when I learned about, with a background in this, people that take opioids like heroin, morphine, Oxycontin, morphines provide, we have these receptors, and morphines are basically like little balls that land on top of these pain receptors in our brains, in our bodies, and they relieve pain. Fentanyl was synthesized in the early 1960s in Denmark and has since been a number one line of pain mitigation in hospitals around the world, everywhere, for severe pain. So morphine would be for somebody who's dealing with pretty significant pain, but there are some circumstances where morphine will not come close to mitigating that pain.
Yeah.
Like with people with severe cancer, people living on ventilators, and that's where fentanyl is used. But never given away as a pill, it's nothing like some of the other legal drugs that can be taken home. And essentially, the reason why, as I would speak to these fentanyl users, they would describe how heroin was just so weak, and how they would have to wait 10 or 15 minutes for it to finally hit. Where if you're addicted to an opioid, you want it to hit right away. And what I was saying about opioids is this is a drug for people in pain.
Yeah.
Cocaine is for people that want to have more fun. Alcohol is for people that maybe want to be more social and loose. Opioids mellow you out. They reduce physical pain. They reduce emotional pain. And as I would listen to these and sit with these users, and given my background in developmental trauma, I would lightly get around, so are you from here? I would get to what was your family of origin.
Right.
And 100% of the time, their family of origin was really bad. And so an opioid is a great drug if you're dealing with emotional pain. The real dangerous part of this particular drug is that it's dirt cheap almost to make. There are probably 1 billion pills just in this country alone. So they're very accessible. You could buy a pill for a couple bucks, $1 a pill. Think of that. Think of a can of cheap beer.
Yeah.
It's going to cost what, $3-4 or something there.
Well, yeah, sure, cheap. The 150,
Yeah,
maybe.
cheap.
Yeah.
But a fentanyl pill costs £1, and it gives you 5 hours of utter. Anybody that's had prescription pain medication before could relate. Now, some people actually have adverse reactions to it, about 20%. But most people are just like, wow, the pain is gone. I feel pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, think about just general mental health issues that are prevalent around the world. But let's just say in the UK or in the US, right? A lot of people suffer from various forms of mental illness, of stress, anxiety, loneliness, pain, disappointment. The perfect drug for that group is an opioid.
Yeah.
It just takes away all the pain. Xanax does in a way. Xanax isn't an opioid. So anyway, what we're dealing with now is the reality of two of the largest criminal organizations in the world, the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico and the Jalisco cartel in Mexico, capitalizing on the prescription drug crisis that was in the United States from like late 90s to about 2010, and realizing what a wonderful way to make a hell of a lot of money. And so they're businesses, very, very high sophisticated businesses. And they've discovered that manufacturing synthetic-based opioids, chemical-based opioids, is a lot more lucrative than going out and harvesting poppy and then irrigating it, and right. So that we're in this global shift from crop-based drugs to synthetic-based drugs. And the last thing I'll say is they also realize that a lot of people like their pills instead of, paraphernalia that's needed for other drugs, or drinking that, a pill you can have in your pocket and you put it in your mouth and no one knows. And that's true in the UK. It's true for different classes of drugs. But they decided, well, let's just make Xanax and Percocet and other pills that people have been addicted to legally, or through their doctors, and let's make counterfeit pills so that dealers could sell them. You would never see the difference between them. And they're not trying to kill people, but a lot of people have taken Xanax, but it's got fentanyl in it, not Xanax, or not the active ingredient. And the problem is this stuff is so potent, there's almost no margin for error. So they don't mix it perfectly in their blenders, or if someone metabolizes fentanyl differently, they just die like this. So you have a lot of young people, lots and lots and lots of young people, just experimenting like everyone does when they're 14, 15, with a drink or, a joint, or in this case, a pill. And despite virtually everybody hearing the word fentanyl, knowing the word, most people don't understand what I just told you.
No.
There's a big, so what we're trying to do is, our charter is concerned with a comprehensive solution. The Chinese government is fighting a proxy war in the United States. Some people might hear that and think, oh my gosh, she's a conspiracy theorist. I'm not. This is in the interest of the Chinese government, the United States fentanyl crisis. It's exactly what they want. Instability, us focusing our time, energy, money on something else. It's so in their benefit to sell the chemicals to the Mexican cartel. That's what happens. And so this is all documented. You could read reams of papers and hearings on the Chinese government and their refusal to shut it down. They could shut it down tomorrow because Xi Jinping, he just said, don't, they wouldn't. And it's it's really going global. The cartel works in, I don't even remember how many countries, 50, 60 different countries. And they are already making this particular drug, and there are other ones coming out, accessible to people in countries that are looking, like we're talking about the church, that are suffering from anxiety, loneliness, being on Instagram and seeing how insignificant they are because of all these other people that are doing so well. We really are as a world in a whole, you think about the scripture and the 10 Commandments, and the reason envy was there is it's a very primitive part of our psychology to see someone else with something and ask the heavens, why don't I have that? It could be having a father, it could be having a Mercedes Benz, it could be having a certain body type. But the reality of envy has been so multiplied by this damn thing, right? And so now you see a lot more anxiety, especially amongst teenagers, because of that reality. But very much is true with adults. We all are there. And so how do we mitigate that feeling of depression, anxiety, lack of fulfillment, and these pills are a pretty damn good remedy because they just take all that anxiety away. And we've just seen that this is the very beginning of this crisis. And
the scale, I mean, when people are interested, they're able to, I'll put all the various links that you've mentioned today into the description. But the scale of this is gargantuan. And in the US, people that are watching it from the US will know this quite, firsthand. Over here, I don't think we have the same awareness, especially if you haven't travelled and been to some of your big cities and just seen it firsthand. Like I saw it in Tenderloin at a level that I just could not believe it existed. I don't want to just draw a comparison just for the hell of it, but it feels like there is a comparison here. And for me, understanding you and trying to get into your world, because you're working really hard on this, aren't you? Is this a turning over a table for you? Is this, I've read this in the Bible, I know this to be true of Jesus, and in specifically the US at the moment, no one's really noticing this. This is going on outside the temples and no one gives a monkeys. People are making lots of money. Is there something in that, or am I stretching it?
I've never thought of it that way, but I think it's, I started with, my belief in the church, my belief in the teachings of Jesus
Yeah.
as central and transformative. And I think for many years, I tried to be a pastor. I was really a horrible pastor because I don't have the diplomacy or sophistication. Take someone like Nicky Gumbel. And this isn't a criticism, it's actually a compliment. Or a John Mumford, the head of the Vineyard, or was in,
Sure.
in the UK, maybe he still is. These people are really talented diplomats,
Yeah.
ambassadors. They're
Well, they're
gifted.
lawyers.
Mike was. They're, in the case of Nicky, and I'm not that guy. I didn't do well with the politics. And then what I really didn't like in the church, and again, this is true, this would be as true, if I was the president of a university. I'm just not good at all the nuancing and bullshitting that you have to do to get, to become successful, I guess, in that space. And so what I prefer about, I remember with Mike would ghost me. Early on, I was vulnerable. I sold my house to use the money from my house to fund Soul Survivor. And then suddenly he just would ghost me. And this is I read about this much later, but I remember how it was so wrong. Matt talked about this in that video. It made me, there's that, we're in the church. So did I say something wrong? Am I black? Is he going to make a public statement about it? It's so wrong for people that are shepherds to leave their sheep. It causes confusion and disorientation.
Yeah.
And that's true in terms of animal sociology. It's true for mammals. And
Sure.
I wasn't really good at, in this space, there are a lot of areas where I have to be diplomatic, but in the church, God told you something, so what do I have to say about it? If the Lord is leading us to do X, Y, Z, and I saw this firsthand, if you even so much respectfully question some of these people. That's why I think this charismatic business is a really dangerous business.
Yeah.
Not that I don't think God, I do believe he does still impress things upon people, but you see it just wielded so easily, by some of these guys. Every church service, there has to be words. I guess God is never silent on a Sunday night at 6 p.m. when they're having the ministry time. He's always, and so, you started with Mike calling out this kid who he didn't know, saying God has a plan for your life. I don't have time for that anymore. What I'm doing now is caring for broken mothers, broken fathers, broken siblings, standing in their place, creating platforms so that they could be heard. And I just pulled this up.
Yeah.
I'm going to read this to you, and I will be emotional probably. This was on Wednesday. What is it today? Monday. Wednesday, not last Wednesday, but the Wednesday before. So almost 2 weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
I'm boarding a plane, and I received this letter this text from a lady in Salt Lake City. She lost her son last year. Walk for Lives is a national movement, and our vision was to train parents who lost their kids to perform their greatest dream besides having their kid back, which is alerting other people that it could happen to them. It's primitive. It's in their core to want to have a voice.
Yeah.
To want to give back, if you will. So we created a program where these mothers, fathers around the country, under this banner of Walk for Lives, led by family members who have tragically lost their kids. The number one the greatest experience of emotional pain and suffering comes from losing a child. You can look that up. It's irrefutable.
Yeah.
So that's the level of brokenness that we're dealing with. People who are experiencing the ultimate form of emotional pain. So when I'm paralleling to Jesus, these are the least of these.
Yeah.
And this lady says this to me. Good morning, Paul. Out of the blue. It's not like we text very often at all. I just wanted to repeat to you what one of my pastors said to me yesterday. And I knew this lady was a Christian, but I mean, we have hundreds of people like this. This is just one of many. What one of my pastors said to me yesterday that really made an impact on my thoughts. I'm in a women's group from our church. We meet once a month for food and a Bible study and prayer. This month is Pastor Appreciation Month. Our group all pitched in to have another member from the church cook them homemade Indian food as a surprise for their once a week staff meeting. After we served them and set up our own selves to eat with them, Ira, the pastor, who came to Walk for Lives, along with other members from my church, was talking about how amazing the event was. He actually said a closing prayer at the end of the event, and even prayed with others that were at the event. Now, our organization is not a Christian organization. This one just happened to be. Anyway, Jody, one of the other pastors, had been out of the country for several months. And she said, Cynthia, this ministry God chose for you, even though you did not ask for it. And he has chosen it for your son. Wait, let me read this again. And she said, Cynthia, this ministry, God, you're going to have to edit this. Maybe not.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Cynthia, this ministry, God chose you for, even though you did not ask for it. He has chosen you and your son, even though he is not here working with you. Paul, it stuck with me all night. I had to tell you. I told everyone at the table, as I was filled with emotion, that Walk for Lives is the greatest achievement I have ever done in my life. And it was fantastic. Besides having my sons, that is. This is your ministry, Paul. God has called you to do this at such a national level, and to bring those of us with loss out to help you serve in this very important ministry. I just wanted you to know, God bless you, and I pray for you and your family, especially given the loss of your father. Much love. And so, no, I'm not wearing my religion on my sleeve, but people ask me sometimes why, and I get to talk about Jesus a lot and other things, and this woman calls it my ministry.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I don't have the confidence to stand on the stage and point at you. You know? It's interesting. Yeah.
I want to say something, Stan. Having bashed the entire institution of prophetic ministry, which I don't think I have, but I think we got to be careful. Part of the reason I never operated in the way that Mike and some of these others, John Wimber, have, to the benefit of many people. To be clear, Mike had tremendous positive impact on people, including me. But I never heard from God. I've always been more, there's an event once at the Vineyard, and this prophet had come in. I think his name was Mahesh Chabda, if I remember. And he had everybody stand up in this huge semicircle. There were like 200 people. Uh-huh. And I just was never going to fake it. I'm like that guy, right? Yeah. And it doesn't mean that I'm not open. I was healed of shin splints at one of the first Vineyard services I went to. So it's not that I don't believe in stuff. And I was like, when you pray sometimes, but you squint. Anyway, I do that. And they're like, he's praying for people. It's like every single one is falling back. And I'm like, I'm open, Lord. If you want to knock me over, knock me over. I am not faking it.
Yeah.
And he literally every single one, like 127, 128, 129. I'm like, and he like puts his hand on me, gives a little push. I think they all do a little bit of a push. And I just didn't fall. And then he kept going, and I looked, and they're literally like, I don't know, 149 people on the ground, and then Paul Martin standing. And I don't say that as I'm not bragging, I'm just saying I've always been a little bit more. And so perhaps the reason I never went and said, God told me that you're going to be a missionary to, wherever, is because I would really need to hear a very certain kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when I was in New Mexico, and this is like month 3 or 4, and I started working with the teenagers in the high schools and at the shelter, and just seeing utter hopelessness amongst this community, I felt that God was calling me to minister using my talents. I'm a big believer in the parable of talents, and I know that I had a background and stuff in this town. And it was really interesting because I have 3 kids, but 2 of them came out at separate times so we could go skiing about an hour and a half away. And I drove them through Espanola. And I said, guys, I know you don't hear me very often say this, but I really feel like God's calling me to help in this community. And both of them, they weren't together. It was separate times. They both said, Dad, be careful. This place is really scary. Very beautiful part of the country, but, and I was right. That was a word from God. It's just, they sometimes say you got it wrong.
Yeah.
And he did speak to me to care for people who are suffering from this horrible drug. It was on a broader level, not just within the town. I have to say, though, I did get a call about 4 or 5 months ago, and a lady from Espanola called and said, I lost my son, Rio. This is something I've been praying about. Can I do the Walk for Lives in Espanola? And they had one in Espanola. It was on the news. Super cool.
Really cool. Oh, well, I'd love to keep on chatting with you. But and let's I want to hear how it goes, and I do want to help. There's if I can, and how do I be brave in this? I'll put some links in the description as to what you're doing. Hopefully that the chicken has joined. We've got a cockerel free ranging in the garden, and he's back out now. The sun's out. He's literally just at the window here.
Those chickens in England know how to take advantage of it.
I don't know if you can see. It's a bit.
Sun.
There you go.
I love it. All right, mate. Well, hey, sorry about it taking so long, but like I told you, after the walk and all that, I'm kind of feeling like I worked 7 days a week for 7 months, like 10-hour days. I just knew I had to do it. I know I won't always have to work that hard, but it was pretty intense.
Thanks for your time.
You too, mate. Let's
You're
stay in touch.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.